ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today for the February Mobility and Access Coalition. We have a wonderful panel discussion today that I'm looking forward to. On the call here, we have Jessica's going to be paying attention to the chat, and feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. Also, I can call on you. Next slide. So just a reminder, I think we're all like experts at Zoom by now, but you can open in your browser or you can call in. When you registered, there is a one-click call-in number. So if you lose internet access during the call, you can go ahead and join and listen in. Next slide. And we just ask that everybody keep themselves muted if you're not talking. And if you are talking, please turn on your camera so that we can help with communication. Additionally, you can click on the participants and see who else is in the chat. And then we do have the chat function open. So at this point, can everybody please put their name and their organization in the chat? And just a reminder that these meetings are recorded. And we post them on our YouTube channel after the meeting so that people who aren't able to attend can watch the recording. Thank you for putting your name and organization in the chat. Next slide. So just a reminder that the Mobility and Access Coalition is the Boulder County Local Coordinating Council. We work together on transportation access because we firmly believe that transportation is essential to accessing opportunity, improving quality of life, and having people meet their basic needs. We focus on transportation as a social determinant of health. So you'll see the beautiful pedal graph over there with the purple transportation block. We do think that transportation is a linchpin service that helps people access all other aspects of their life. We do focus on a multimodal approach, and what that means is different options of transportation for people depending on what their needs are. And our goals as an organization are to get people in the safe and thriving section for transportation. So we don't want people to be vulnerable if they're depending on one mode of transportation. Next slide. So this is a pretty busy agenda today. We're going to start off with a panel discussion. Just a reminder, we have a panel discussion on the intersection of housing and transportation. So that'll take about an hour today. And then we do have a series of quick updates that we'll go through at the end. And then we'll end the meeting with a short presentation from our Vision Zero program manager, Liviana Lewin. So she'll be able to give us an update on that project that we received a presentation on. And then we'll conclude talking about next month's meeting, which will be in person. Next slide. Okay. Well, thank you so much. So I want to introduce everybody to our panelists today. We have 4 wonderful panelists. Just want to confirm that everybody is on the call. I think they are. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so if you are not on the panel, I just ask that you turn off your camera, just that way we can focus on the panelists during this time. And we'll turn it over to each of the panelists for a little bit to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about how their organization focuses on housing and transportation combined. Emily, would you like to start us off? You do feel free to share slides if you have a couple of slides during this time.
Awesome. Let me pull them up. Well, first, let me say thank you for the invitation to join you all. My name is Emily Laflamme, and I am with an organization called Center for Neighborhood Technology. We're based in Chicago, but we have folks who are across the country, and our work is focused, some local work here in Chicago and then some national work. And you know what? I'm not even going to worry about trying to do the technology of sharing screens. I'm just going to talk. Yeah. My background is actually in public health. I started in this field in public health, so I loved your framing of transportation and housing as a determinant of health. And that's what got me into this space as well, recognizing that housing and transportation and other root causes are the way that we improve health for everyone. I joined Center for Neighborhood Technology about 2.5 years ago, and CNT's mission is really focused on partnering with community-based organizations and local governments, focusing on creating equitable and resilient neighborhoods. And we have a strong urban analytics research team that develops tools to understand the intersection between housing and transportation. So two of them that I'll talk about a little bit more later, but one combines housing and transportation to understand how both of those contribute to affordability. And the other one is called All Transit, which shows about transit frequency and what is accessible by transit in particular geographies. And then CNT also is involved in policy work around equitable transit-oriented development. We're steering committee members of a coalition here called Elevated Chicago, which is an equitable transit-oriented development group that includes civic organizations, local government, community-based organizations, and we've been working together for the past 8 or so years to pass policy that kind of enables equitable transit-oriented development. So I will share a little bit more about that too as we get into the questions. I'll pass it on.
Great. Thank you, Emily. And I just want to thank you in advance, or thank you again for volunteering or being able to participate today. We really appreciate your national perspective on this. And next we have the kind of a state perspective. So Eugene Howard, we were both mobility managers back when he was in Douglas County and I was in Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. So we go way back, but he's now working at Colorado Department of Local Affairs, and I'll turn it over to him for his introduction.
All right, Angel, thank you so much. And it's so great to be here. I really appreciate being a part of this panel discussion. The work that we are all engaged in is so incredibly important. And so just a quick background, I see some familiar names on the screen, so excited to see old and new friends alike. But yes, I am relatively new in my role. The role at DOLA, the Department of Local Affairs, is a brand spanking new one. So for those of you who are in Colorado or who follow sort of politics here in the Colorado state, in 2024, our legislature was really ambitious and rather successful in passing some new laws around housing, transportation-oriented development, accessory dwelling units. There's a broad range of sort of land use related policies that are now law. And a part of that was establishing a brand new team to help implement the new laws. And so I am really grateful that I was selected to be the technical assistance unit manager for our planning team, as there's a team of 5 of us. And we are looking to implement the transit-oriented communities law. We are looking at how best to set up and implement the accessory dwelling unit law to really look for ways to provide more housing, more affordable housing, particularly located near and adjacent to our transit areas. We are also working to reduce the parking requirements that often conflict with building affordable housing and can end up with us having more spaces for cars and less places for spaces for people. And then on top of that, let's see, housing, and looking at ways to incentivize affordable housing, again, adjacent to our transit areas. So it's a brand new role. I've been in it all of, I think about 8 to 9 weeks now, but really excited to be a part of this discussion today to share with you all how you all can help support and engage in that process. So I'll keep it brief and keep it there. But happy to engage in conversations and field questions when we get to that portion. So thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. Wonderful. So our next panelist, we work with them pretty closely. So Boulder County Housing Authority is one of the housing authorities here in Boulder County. So I'm going to turn it over to Tanya Jimenez, who's one of the developers on that team.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya Jimenez. I am a housing developer with BCHA. Yeah, I'm I'm pretty excited about the work we're doing. You know, BCHA, we create new affordable housing throughout our county, as well as preserve our existing housing. And we also acquire and rehab new properties. So there's a lot that we're doing. Currently, our big project is Willoughby Corner in Lafayette. We're wrapping up phase one of that project. It's phase one includes 129 units of affordable housing. But once it's all completed, once all three phases are completed, it'll be a 400 unit brand new neighborhood in the east side of Lafayette. That will be all affordable, net zero ready. So the largest all affordable, net zero ready project in Colorado. So we're pretty excited about that. We also have other projects going on, other projects in our pipeline, but this one is the big one. So it's the one we're focusing on at the moment. But yeah, we're excited to work with Angel's team and just different partners to bring also transportation to our neighborhoods, to our new properties.
Great, thank you, Tanya. I appreciate it. And the next perspective that we're bringing to the table is with our regional transportation provider, RTD. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chessy, who oversees the transit-oriented communities. I think I might have got that right.
Yeah, I'm Chessy Brady. I'm the manager of transit-oriented development at RTD. We sit within transit-oriented communities, which is part of planning. So no need for you to get it all right until it's pretty confusing. And I'll share some slides, which I think I'm sharing the wrong screen, aren't I? Or can you see my children?
No, we're good. We can see.
Okay, good.
Unless you call houses your children.
No. Okay. No. But so I thought I did bring some slides, and I think it actually might be good to kind of to ground us and get us all on the same page as we're going into the questions, which I'm really looking forward to the discussion with the other panelists. So at RTD, when we talk about transit-oriented development, we're speaking specifically about development that is more dense and more compact than the surrounding area, adjacent to rail or BRT. And so that means that TOD is going to look a little bit different if it's in Denver or if it's in Lafayette, for example, and we're conscious of that difference. Ideally, it has a mix of uses, ideally residential and retail and office, and people are able to meet some of their immediate needs right in that area. And then we're always looking for good design. Kind of best practices in planning should be applied to these projects, because we want to maximize the walkability and access to transit and everything that basically good planning is doing these days anyway. Why do we do TOD? Well, some of it's part of this Housing and Transportation Index, which I think we'll hear more about from our other panelist. And I just pulled these numbers the other day, and I was actually surprised at, this is for the Dr. Cog region, that 15% of costs was transportation, 26% of people's incomes going to housing. That's, honestly, it's lower than I expected. So I wonder if we can hear a little bit more about that as we continue the conversation. But the reason, the benefits of TOD are that we are keeping those costs low so that people have more income to spend on the rest of their many needs. We want to discourage sprawl, reduce emissions, encourage the density of housing and other uses around existing infrastructure, whether that's transit or roads and sewers, increase walkability. And then from the transit agency perspective, when we're talking about development on private land or on RTD land, we want always to serve more people. We want more ridership. And so we want more people living and working at the station. And then in cases where our RTD's land is actually being used for development, we would expect to see some revenues from the land, though I always like to caution that it's not that much. So no one should get too excited about how much money RTD could make from TOD, because I love TOD. It's not going to save the world. or I'm not going to save RTD's budget. So joint development is what we call TOD on RTD property. And this is just to give you an idea of the stations that we're thinking about when we're considering development on RTD property. Basically talking about park and rides, all of which are active, which are serving a transit purpose. And so we have to balance, and this is kind of new for RTD, to be balancing the need for housing and the benefits of housing and ridership against the need for parking, especially in areas where we don't provide this feeder service that allows people to get to the train. We need people to get there. Sometimes they need a place to park. So it's a balancing act. And we have done TOD. I'm sure you're all familiar with Union Station. Alameda Station is another one. Old Town Arvada, the Russells finally open, which is very exciting. And then we have other projects in the works. The Hattie is under construction, affordable condos for sale. Excited about that. And then potential future development at Central Park Station, which will replace parking spaces. So that maybe opens up some questions that we can discuss in the panel. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thanks. So we intentionally selected representatives at the local, regional, state, and federal levels to bring those perspectives. So for this next question, we'll start at the local level. So Tanya, we'll start with you. In Boulder County Housing Authority's perspective, what are some of the key challenges you face when you're trying to align transportation access with building affordable housing units and then trying to achieve equity within your development of projects? So then I'll put that in the chat as well for you. And if you want me to repeat, I can.
Yeah. Well, I would say there's a lot of challenges with just developing affordable housing in general. Not surprising, funding is one of them. Every year just costs to develop go up, construction costs go up. It's always just nice to maybe have extra funding for like more infrastructure that can go into these projects. I guess another challenge we face is sort of just timing of a project. I know it's important to align like our leasing when our project opens and starts leasing to the time frame of when bus service can start as well, to create like that habit early on. And with development projects, it's just tricky. Like weather can be a factor, just funding, and there's so many things that kind of play into how that schedule moves. But we do try our best to again stay in contact with our partners, our transportation team, RTD. We try to have these conversations early on with them. To see like what we best can do, how we can connect existing routes. Yeah, that's what I can think of.
Yeah, great. And I think that Willoughby is a great example, right? Because you worked really closely with RTD. Yeah, wonderful. So Chessy, from a regional perspective, what do you think are some of the key challenges that exist to align transportation access with affordable housing and equity and community development projects?
Yeah, I mean, financing is definitely the big one. Tanya mentioned that, and I think if there were more subsidies, we could get a whole lot more affordable housing built. And from RTD's side, what we will be exploring more this spring as we consider amending our equitable TOD policy is whether RTD is interested in discounting land in order to encourage affordable housing. I mean, and in theory we are, or in policy we are, but no more specifically than that. And so we need to have a discussion, the board needs to have a discussion about whether and how much RTD could contribute to helping make these projects happen on RTD land, which is of course typically our park and rides. So there you have that access ready to go. We were able to work with BCHA to get access for the Willoughby. And I'm sure Tanya had a lot of discussions with our service planners about it. And it's really tough because we because when we're thinking about equity, we're governed by Title VI requirements by the federal government, and we want to serve the affordable housing, but also that means we have to change how we're serving other areas. It's hard to make the service go around. So the best way for affordable housing is to have that transportation access is to locate where there is transportation already. RTD can maybe help that happen if we can reduce our own parking needs and potentially discount our land to help those projects get started.
Yeah, that's great news. I mean, I do think that as you move forward with the ETOD policy, we'd love to be involved. That'd be, yeah, hopefully we can get some more affordable housing. Going to transition to the state level. So Eugene, from your perspective at the state level, I know you're relatively new to your position, but what are those challenges that really face the alignment, face us when we're trying to align transportation and housing?
Thank you for that question. And two things have been mentioned already repeatedly, and I want to sort of lean into those. Change. I think we all know, whether it's in our own personal lives or in the work that we do, the idea of change can be somewhat uncomfortable for either individuals or neighborhoods, communities. And yet we recognize at the state level that we have a housing crisis. Not only do we have some pretty strong need for housing, we need housing diversity, we need housing choice, and we are really wanting to set the sort of the framework for more affordable housing production. So I think one of the challenges that we are currently facing in light of the new laws is really just truly helping communities understand that the state is not trying to mandate or dictate how a community carries its work out. We are not in that business. However, from the planning lens and through the planning perspective, we are encouraging communities to really look at their transit areas and look for opportunities to potentially modify zoning to allow for more of that diversity and more of the affordable housing product development. And so really leaning into how can we support communities and thinking about their zoning, particularly around their transit areas, so that we can work towards having more production and more affordable production so that people can really see themselves and continue to live in our communities as well as our state. So many people have discovered how fantastic our state is over the last 15 to 20 years, myself included. And so recognizing that we never want to turn anyone away, and we certainly don't want conditions to be out of reach. These are some of the steps that we are looking to make to really encourage the types of outcomes that we all are seeking and desire. I think Chessy mentioned it, thinking about ways that we can really leverage our water resources, our energy resources in a more efficient way. One way to do that is through more compact development, a little bit more higher density around our transit areas, so that a family or an individual that chooses to live in a transit area, maybe they can go with one car instead of two. Or perhaps, like myself, you can ditch the car altogether. And there are ancillary benefits to that. I think that one can experience more health by getting out and walking about in their communities if they are able-bodied. Ways to get to know your neighbors, because there are opportunities to engage, because you're not just driving into a garage and then leaving the next day. And so change is one of those things that is kind of challenging, but we really do hope that as people really work with us and begin to understand that we are not trying to mandate that any community does any particular thing, but simply look at and perhaps update their zoning so that the private market can respond and provide the housing and housing choice that we would love to see more of around our transit facilities. It's not only good for our environment and good for home ownership and apartment dwellers as well, but really helps us make the best use of the investments that we've already made in our transportation networks. So I'll stop there just to leave more time for other questions, but those are some of the things that I think we are seeing at the moment.
Great, thank you. So Emily, from like the national perspective, I know you see many different communities. Are there themes that exist as far as barriers, challenges in aligning transportation and affordable housing and equity?
I'll agree with what everyone else already said. And one thing is just thinking about transit systems as an asset and the recovery of our public transit systems from COVID funding, post-COVID funding for public transit. We can't have equitable transit-oriented development if people can't rely on their public transportation system to get them where they want to go. So that's one big thing. And the other piece, which I think almost everyone touched on, but Eugene, you brought it up too, is just concerns about gentrification and displacement and the narratives that go around those two. And this is context and community specific. So in some communities, you see overdevelopment and you see lack of affordability and displacement due to that. And that could be physical displacement, that could be cultural displacement, where people don't feel, a sense of belonging in their neighborhood anymore. Or it's displacement because of disinvestment. And people don't, there aren't the same levels of opportunity in certain places. And then so how do we ensure that there are housing and development that is responding to the local context?
Thank you. Thank you for that. So this next question as we transition really is particularly impactful here in Boulder County because we are a really expensive area and we are seeing longer and longer commutes, and what is considered regional is changing as well. So it's no longer that Denver Boulder commute connection. We have commuters coming in from Fort Collins, Weld County, Larimer counties. So what role does public transportation play in making housing more accessible and equitable? And how can cities improve transportation options, specifically for residents, to support this goal? And we'll go ahead and start with Eugene on this, and I can repeat it just because you're kind of in the business of incentivizing, giving the carrots or encouraging people to diversify their housing. So what role do you think public transportation is playing in making housing more accessible, affordable, and how can cities, from the state perspective, achieve this goal?
Thank you for that question. I will start by just giving a little personal anecdote. Before I even thought of becoming a planner and that I even knew that planning was a profession that people really love to be a part of, I was an everyday citizen. And I moved from another state, so I know you might call me part of the problem, but I did come from a place that had lots of transit choice. It was the Bay Area in California, and I had multiple choices. Whenever I left my home. And I come from car culture. I'm from the Midwest. I couldn't wait to get my driver's license and my learner's permit. I go to the auto show. So I am very much a lover and an appreciative person of the automobile. But what I discovered before knowing that this was a field was that I could leave my car at home and my quality of life was either the same or perhaps even improved. And so I think that by having access to transit, that does get you to where you desire to go, and you can leave your car behind at home. One, you're not paying for parking, you're maybe reducing the maintenance and expenses of owning and operating a car. So again, thinking of ways that we can encourage folks to consider transit areas and leverage transit. Now, you may not be able to use it for every trip, but maybe you could use it for one trip a week or a couple of trips, a month. And it's helping to reduce the expense that would otherwise be spent on moving 4 tires in a metal box to other things. And I think as we look to encourage communities to develop more housing around their existing transit facilities, I think more and more people will realize that it's not always easy, but you can move around and replace some of your car trips with transit. And those are just cost savings that you could reallocate towards housing, maybe more housing, save for that down payment, or just make the day-to-day, month-to-month, paycheck to paycheck, work a little bit more in your favor. So having communities where we have transit. And as Emily mentioned, the more people that live around transit, ideally, the more users we will have, the more predictable, reliable, and efficient that system will become. And ideally will lead to even more service and some of those connector services that you were mentioning at the onset. So we really do see opportunities linking housing and transit and quality of life together to further the quality of life that so many Coloradans moved here for, have grown up with, and want to see in their futures.
Thanks for that, Eugene. You had mentioned the cost of housing and transportation. So, Emily, I'm going to throw the question over to you since I think it's a great segue. In your perspective with the Center for Neighborhood Technology, what role does public transportation play in making housing more accessible and equitable?
Yes, I put a link in the chat to the H&T index, which combines housing and transportation costs into one measure of affordability. And it kind of frames this in terms of what we call location efficiency or location convenience, that dense neighborhoods, housing costs may be higher, but transportation costs, if you are near public transportation, are much lower. And so combined, it may be more affordable to live in these what we call location efficient areas compared to kind of the way realtors talk about it of like, go until you can afford, which leads to sprawl. And while housing costs may be lower, your transportation costs go up because of the lack of public transportation accessibility. So the H+T index kind of brings that together and visualizes it for you. You can do a side-by-side map that, if you look just at housing costs and the percentage of your income that goes towards housing, dense city centers are going to show up in the darkest color. But when you flip it to this index that brings in the benefits of compact, dense development, what we've all been talking about, the color just totally flips. So we use this to visualize and make it really clear the benefit of thinking about public transportation and housing affordability together.
Thank you for that. And thanks for sharing the link. Yeah, I love the index. Chessy, just moving on to you as like a transit provider, like when you're working with cities, what role do you think the cities play in improving transit options for residents or ensuring that it can be served by transit?
Yeah. So we are the transit provider. We don't have any way to manage land use. I mean, land use is purely the responsibility of the counties and cities. And so we're kind of at their mercy when it comes to providing transit service. So the HB 1313 or HB 241313, which Eugene mentioned earlier, which encourages jurisdictions to put more density potential or zoning potential around transit, does support ridership on transit and makes it easier for us to run the system and makes it easier for us to reach people. And I think there's kind of a virtuous cycle there where more people on transit begets better service, begets more people on transit. And so the best way for cities to support transit is to zone in ways that permit the density that transit can support. And then the other piece I'll bring in here, because I think it is important, is like the development review process. That's within cities' control, and that I'm sure Tanya could tell you how difficult it is to get projects through development review in different jurisdictions. And when there are ways to make that easier and make it easier to build on infill sites in particular, which are what are generally related to transit, then again, it's all just a virtuous cycle leading hopefully in the direction of better housing affordability, better transit service, less car use, lower emissions, et cetera.
Great, thank you. Tanya, I know that you had talked about the Willoughby Corner project and just like working with RTD to ensure that there's transit access, not on day one, but as soon as possible after people start moving in. What lessons learned do you have as a developer that other communities and regions could take into account when thinking about affordable transportation and affordable housing together?
I think what has really worked out is, again, just having conversations with RTD early on. Even before I started with BCHA, these conversations were being had. So years before the project even started construction, and I think it just takes a lot of effort and coordination and planning with like different groups to kind of come to a plan. Like what is the plan? Like what existing routes are there, and like how can we connect? What else can what can we do? What will it take to just get this connection going, right? Like how can we get service to our property? The other thing I think is just also, BCHA provides eco passes for all of our residents. That is a really great resource for our residents. I mean, it really like allows them to have just more mobility options while you know, living here. And I think just people really, really like it. And it's just something that, yeah, they would have more access to other places.
Yeah. And also you're like really stepping up as a partner to RTD and like building the bus stops. And then also it's going to be the end of the line, right? So drivers can use the restroom of the community center, right? So I think I'm assuming not all developers are that community minded. So we really appreciate that thought of like, how do we bring the service to our residents? That's great. So we're going to start with Eugene on this one. So we're going to move over to parking. I know that sometimes that's a little bit contradictory, I guess, in people's minds if they're not plugged into the no free or the high cost of free parking discussion. But how do you balance the need for adequate parking in a car-dependent society with the need for kind of making more space for people to live in communities? So how do you balance those two?
That's a good question also. Lots of good questions today. One, I think it's context sensitive. That's been brought up a few times already today. So there are environments within our state where getting access to a transit area is maybe not as onerous as it might be in other parts of the state. And so we recognize that. But in cases where we are in more dense environments, such as a metropolitan Denver area, what we've seen over time is that, and particularly with the changes that have occurred since COVID, building park and rides to accommodate those commuter travelers that would want to travel to a station and then complete their trip by transit. Some of those workers are now working remotely. And so we are, and Chessy can correct me on this, but it's our impression that a lot of our larger parking areas aren't necessarily being as utilized as they might have been in the past. And so there are examples of that. And I think RTD and Chessy and her team are responding to these changing characteristics within our region by repurposing what once was a park and ride or a surface parking lot to provide housing. And so I think we are in a place where we may not need the same type of inventory for cars as we did maybe in the 90s or early 2000s. And so looking for opportunities to reduce the parking requirements to help encourage maybe more traditional developers or even more their financiers, who often will dictate how much parking they feel a project should have. by making some of those policy changes, we're hoping to stimulate new thinking in our market. And so that instead of every apartment having 2.5, 3 parking stalls, maybe we can just get away with 1.5, or maybe even 1, or even lower in more urbanized, denser areas. So it's really an opportunity to encourage a shift in thinking, a shift in priorities, and particularly in a state like Colorado, where we know our need for housing diversity and more affordable housing at different price points is so critical and key to our future. And also, again, just emphasizing really prudent resource use, whether that be water, electricity, land itself. So, maybe we don't all need to have 2 or 3 parking stalls for our single, 1-bedroom apartment or our townhome, and maybe we can do with less. And leverage some of the new opportunities like the transit, I wanted to say TNCs, but the Ubers and the Lyfts in the world. We've got electrified bikes and scooters that are helping to provide some first and last mile solutions, where it might have only been up to a car to do that, 5, 10, 15 years ago. So I think we're at an inflection point where we can rethink and perhaps recalibrate how we use our precious land resources.
That's great. And I see that Bobby is on the call as well. But one tactic that we've used is investing in car share vehicles at certain locations. So it's kind of, they talk about the car light lifestyle. So it's a good partnership that we have. But thanks for hopping on, Bobby.
Sure, I was just gonna, I heard part of it, but then I had a car emergency, so I had to hop off the call. But if anyone wants any information, I can send them a link and with a promo code to join for free, and then I can give you a $25 drive credit as well. We just and we have been most of our cars are in densely populated areas, and we just love our members.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And they're a nonprofit, so that's
Yeah, we are a
always good.
nonprofit.
Yeah.
Local here in Colorado, in Denver, Boulder.
Yeah, wonderful. So Chessy, I see that you put the parking analysis that RTD did. You had mentioned earlier the parking garages. So we know that RTD's invested in parking, and there's that delicate balance between ridership and how to get people there. So in your perspective, what is that balance like?
Sure. Yeah, there's really 2 parking conversations that have to happen at the same time at RTD. One is the park and ride conversation and people providing parking for transit customers. And then the other is how much parking should be supplied by private developers in residential and office developments. And so, yeah, if anybody wants to read more, if you read Emily's link and my link, you'll be a parking expert in like 2 hours probably. That it's in 2019 RTD, or in 2020, in the height of COVID, some RTD staff rollerbladed through parking garages and counted cars at peak times. And Eugene was referencing 2 spaces per unit, 3 spaces per unit. What our data found was that in market rate apartments, only 0.7 spaces per unit are actually needed, because that's how much is actually going to be used at peak times. So requiring more than that from a zoning perspective would be contrary to actually getting housing built. And I think that that's part of what HB 241304 was trying to address in eliminating parking requirements around transit. Because if they're going to be eliminated anywhere, doing it around transit and then allowing private developers to determine how much parking they want to build, in my mind, makes a lot of sense, especially since, as Eugene mentioned, they still have to get those buildings financed, and the banks typically aren't very excited about providing too little parking, lest the buildings don't lease up. So all that to say, I think there's a lot of sort of natural market controls in place to provide the correct amount of parking, and leaving it up to developers sounds like a scary idea, but I think is actually responsible, especially when so many of our buildings are overparked at this point. So that's the residential and private side. On the RTD side, we have seen a severe decrease in parking utilization since COVID. 2019 we have 30,000 spaces total in the district. In 2019, 66% of them were utilized at peak times. 2024, it was 19%. So we have a lot of empty parking spaces at peak times. And that means, some park and rides are 70% full, others are 1% full. And so we are looking at where it makes the most sense to consider reducing the number of parking spaces to convert to residential or other uses, and trying to, as I said, balance those needs of the region, and especially taking into account which parcels have the kind of least resistance to development and the most potential from a market perspective, because the market is still king. And if the developers don't believe that they can build something there, or if it costs too much, it's not, no amount of subsidy is actually going to get it built. So we also have to, we have to respect the market to a certain degree.
Thank you for that. We're going to pass it over to Emily for the question as well. From a national perspective, I see that you put the parking study that CNT did. What light can you shed on parking?
Yeah, well, I'm jealous that you all did rollerblades for your parking count. That sounds awesome. We did something similar. This is the study I shared in the chat is based in Chicago, and it's from 2016. So it's old now. We're planning to do an update this year, but we did the same thing. Middle of the night, residential buildings of a weeknight. Theoretically, that's when parking lots should be most full, and had almost the exact same conclusion about 0.7 stalls were actually used. So, the other thing though is like parking it's when you brought this up, it's like parking is one of those topics. We could talk about it forever, and community residents could talk about it forever. Parking is one of those things where it's both data and narrative, and you can put as much data in front of people as you want, and you will still get the question about parking, And so we use a framework thinking about the enabling environment for development. And part of that is, zoning and incentives and regulations. But it's also some of this squishier stuff of what's the narrative and how do you talk about parking, and how do you talk about it in terms of right-sizing parking, like Chessy's saying. It's not like removing parking, it's making it match the need of the community, and that's dependent on your transit service levels and a whole other range of things. And then how do you talk about what's being added as well, not just what's being taken away? How is this contributing to a neighborhood and kind of the vibrancy of a neighborhood, and what can be there too? So and then in terms of decisions, like Chessy's saying too, to get projects approved, where are the barriers, and what is up for, what's available by right, and what has to go through multiple layers of approval, and how do you change those processes to kind of favor affordable housing and spend more on that and less on parking space.
I think that's a great segue to Tanya, because as a developer, I'm sure that you face, that parking's expensive to build. And as Emily was talking about, like what's being added, right? When you don't provide parking, I'm sure that you feel that very closely as a developer. So what are your perspectives on parking and building new developments?
Yeah, I would say what everyone else has been saying as well. We would rather build more units, higher quality units, than parking. But, parking is needed at some level. We do our best to work with the cities on any parking reductions, just understanding like there usually is more parking required than is actually used. We see this in our portfolio as well. So we kind of take what we're seeing and try to improve on the next building and try to provide this information and see if we can convince our cities on that. Yeah, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Tanya. So I think, Tanya, you had a good example about working with transit agency when you're developing. So this next question is really about collaboration. So how can we get local governments, developers, and transit agencies to work together better to improve multimodal transportation access for residents? And we can start with you again, Tanya.
Sure. Yeah, again, I think it's just about reaching out, having conversations early on. I think we've kept those conversations with our partners, our TD. I think we have quarterly meetings with them just to keep them updated on the progress of a project. It takes years to get a project, just like one project, going and completed. So it does take time, but it is having that consistent, recurring contact and keeping up with each other. Any outstanding items we go through, just to make sure that we follow through. We have a plan and we follow through and complete our project with something that works for the residents, that has different options for them, and we can have transit coming through. So yeah.
And I know, especially with Willoughby Corner, there were like key trail connections as well, in addition to transit, right? That we wanted to make sure that we got on the radar of whoever was responsible for the land. So you all have done a great job of just looking holistically at your property. Emily, we'll go ahead and from your perspective on the national level, like how can local governments, developers, transit agencies work together better? I don't know if there's any policy recommendations that CNT has been promoting.
I wish I had a really good answer for this. I think I actually, if it's okay, give a more local answer, because I don't know that there is like one answer that is going to work everywhere. But what we're working on more on the local level, I'll just reiterate what Tanya said. It's like having the space where you are just in communication and regular contact. It does really help. We have an ETOD working group in Chicago that has been meeting since 2018, that includes, all of these agencies, developers, community-based organizations, and they started working on an ETOD policy plan that morphed into our ETOD ordinance in Chicago, which was passed in 2022, and it's continuing to meet because there are aspects of that policy that couldn't be included in its original form, and now we're trying to bring back to be included now. And it's just been really helpful to have the space to discuss these things, and the work kind of comes in and out, but there's always the relationships and the trust built between that group of people with really different perspectives. And the other thing I'll mention, again, it's a local example, but we have something called Cut the Tape, which is really about identifying areas where we can make it easier for developers and for others to do affordable housing development near transit. And that similarly has a group that includes all of these players together to talk about, here's where the barrier is and what can we do at the city level to remove that barrier, make it easier, make it cheaper to make this happen.
Great, thank you. Eugene, we're going to move on to you. I know that you may not be in the space of like encouraging local governments, developers, and transit agencies to collaborate, but from your experience as a mobility manager, or even in Denver, or even as an instructor at CU Denver, like what are your perspectives on how we can get local governments, developers, and transit agencies to improve multimodal transportation options and work together?
Well, collaboration for sure. I can think of a couple of local examples here in the Denver area where communities during a planning effort, I'm thinking in the far northeast part of the city and county of Denver. So the Montbello community in particular, when I was a city planner and working on an area plan for that community and with that community, one of the things that they really emphasized was a desire for a circulator shuttle. They wanted a way for their senior population and individuals who were lower income or perhaps with different abilities to have the same freedoms of movement that able-bodied people with cars also had. And so there was a strong recommendation in a policy document, the area plan, that then led to the ability to seek some funding, which led to a pilot program, which then really provided free trips for seniors in that area, connecting them to some vital services within the community, but also connecting them to transit so that they could get beyond their community to other parts of the city and the region. And I would argue that that was a successful demonstration that has now been replicated in 2 other areas of the state, or of the city rather. And so being creative, thinking about solutions that could even lead to new innovations or new businesses, new small businesses for areas and communities. So it's about the creativity, the willing to try new things, try something on a temporary basis, see what works, test it, refine it, try it again. And so those are some of the ways that I think we can help provide more mobility options and choice to more people beyond the personal automobile, and in addition to and in support of our transit investments that have been made. So I do think that it takes some thinking, some willing to take some risks, some willingness to even fail, because I think we learn when we fail, and really engaging the users of any proposed concept or idea. So it's really important to make sure that the community's voice is first and foremost in what they see as the solutions for their communities that could leverage these other players, our transit providers, our developers, our city officials, elected officials, planners, you name it. So I'm really excited to see some of the improvements and innovations that have been made here in the Denver area, and really hope that we see more of that being tried and sort of replicated in other communities that are context specific and context sensitive for those communities and their residents.
Great, thank you. So Chessy, from your perspective, I know you mentioned that RTD doesn't control the land use. How can local governments and developers work more closely with RTD to ensure that residents have multimodal transportation access?
Well, I'll speak just from a TOD perspective and not try to respond for all of RTD. But I am communicating early and often, again, is really the key. I think obviously we have public meetings, but I think many of you who work for jurisdictions know that you know who your service planners are, you know how to reach them. They want to improve service and they want to meet the people where they are, and they're always looking for ways to do that, to improve efficiency or build ridership. And so I think reaching out with ideas and suggestions, or even, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, this is what you're seeing, providing that information is key. And that's helping the service planners on the ground make those decisions around bus routes. And when it comes to building near transit, it's the same thing. I mean, many of your jurisdictions refer projects to RTD for our own development review, and that's sometimes how we provide feedback on access to stations or access to bus stops. But you and developers can also start those conversations earlier. If it's kind of TOD specific, you're always welcome to email me or email tod@rtd-denver.com. That's also me. And we can start those conversations and think about better way, how future buildings can get sidewalk access to stations, how, bus stop improvements, all the rest. We're also doing a bus stop study right now to inventory, I think, all of the bus stops in the district, and look at it, kind of make a plan for how to work with jurisdictions to improve those, which will then improve access for all the surrounding neighborhoods. So
Yeah, that's great.
communicate.
I did hear that Austin has like a guide, like just a one sheet cut sheet for developers. Like, please, like these are the standards for turn radiuses. And so I don't know, like I don't know if RTD's ever thought about that, but yeah, that was a good idea. So we are going to move on to the last question. We like to ask the magic wand question. So we'll start with you, Emily. So if you had a magic wand, what is one thing that you would change that would support coordination between housing and multimodal transportation access?
So I spent a lot of time thinking about this, of like a million things, but I think the one I'm going to pick is overly abundant, like a glorious amount of funding for public transportation. Just yeah, there you
I see
go.
Chessy's giving you the thumbs up, so support.
Yes. Just make it incredible. You can get anywhere you want to go, and
Yeah, I'm here for it. Yeah, that's a good idea. So Eugene, what's one magic wand wish that you would get with housing and transportation?
I love this idea of curiosity. So again, I mentioned at the onset, there's some concerns around change, or how much change, or the speed of which change is occurring. And I would just invite individuals to be curious and to really imagine a place, not only that the place that they know and that they're familiar with, but think about their friends and neighbors, think about their children or grandchildren if they have them, and what kind of place we want to leave behind. I imagine a world where my children and grandchildren have ease of movement. They have the opportunity to live in a home, a townhome, or an apartment if that's what they choose, and the ability to get and be connected to any place within the service area of a transit network or region. And so I just really would love for folks to, as much as they can, set their feelings to the side for a moment and just imagine that place, and think about what we can do and the kind of place and communities that we can create, where we all have a place, no matter how old you are, no matter how able-bodied you are. That's what I envision and imagine, where we get to know our neighbors, the air is fresh, and we just all get along.
Wonderful. I'm on board for that one too. So Tanya, what's your magic wand change that you would make?
Change. I guess I would say, like, I would love to get to a point where, bus service and just there's different, I guess, non-individual car use is like the main mode of transportation in affordable housing. Like, bus service runs often and, frequent and is reliable, that our residents choose that over like cars. That would be fantastic. That would help, probably reduce our parking and, just reduce cost overall. That would be fantastic. But I'll also add in there some funding until we get there, additional funding.
Yeah. That's great. Chessy, what's your magic wand change that you're gonna make?
Emily's already provided all the funding that I need. But I think it's maybe worth noting that if we had all the funding in the world and and we knew it was sustainable, then purchasing the buses so that we could provide frequent enough service to Tanya's residences, paying the operators so that they were available to drive those buses, taking care of all of our maintenance projects quickly and efficiently, and before they become too serious, like that. Having that sustainable source of revenue is is key for really providing the kind of service that I think the district wants to see. And at this point, the federal government being what it is, I think maybe we do need a magic wand for that. But you know, it's not necessarily so far out of reach in under normal circumstances. So, and funding for housing too. Glorious amounts of funding for affordable housing.
All around, glorious amounts of funding. Well, I just want to thank you all so much for your time today. It was a really engaging and thoughtful panel discussion. I really appreciate you all taking time. I know you have busy schedules, lots on your plate. But we will go ahead and we included your email addresses in the agenda when we sent it out. So MAC attendees, if you wanted to follow up with one of the panelists, then you could reach out to them directly if you'd want, or you could send questions to us and we'll forward them. But thank you again for your time, and I look forward to this magic wand future where we have tons of housing and tons of transit and great community connections, and nobody is just parking in their garage, not talking to their neighbors. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. So we're going to transition to the updates. So we have a couple of updates. I know we're a little bit tight on time here. So our amazing panelists today. It was a great discussion. Thank you to the members of the MAC who attended the in-person planning session that suggested this panel discussion. And thanks to our co-chairs who helped plan the questions and the panelists as well. Next slide. So I just wanted to draw everybody's attention, and we'll include this in our MAC newsletter follow-up, that the Boulder County Commissioners wanted to restate their commitment to value, respect, and support all individuals. This was a very thoughtful statement that they sent out, and you can dig into it a little bit more. They have some links that you can see at the bottom of the page. You can just search boco.org/news, and this news press release should be on there. Next slide. One of the resources that are included in that link is immigrant resources. So Boulder County has consolidated immigrant resources in both English and Spanish, and put them on the website. I know, Jessica, I think you were supposed to actually do this update, so I'm sorry. I will pass it off to you. Do you have anything else to add about the resources?
Oh, no, I added the link in the chat, and I think it's a very robust website. There is information about legal services, booklets, and guides that people can print. And then there's also let me see, services for partner organizations. So depending on a specific question that somebody may have, and also mental health supports too. And before we move on to the next slide, Angel, did you want to introduce Felipe?
Yeah, that's great. So we have a new team member. So Felipe started yesterday, so this is his second day. So I want to introduce Felipe Mesqueda Jimenez, and he is our new outreach and engagement coordinator. So it's we kind of retooled some of our job descriptions, but I don't know, Felipe, if you want to turn on your camera and just say hi.
Sure. How's everyone? Really, again, very insightful meeting, and the panels were amazing. Just want to say I'm very excited to be in this position as an outreach coordinator with Mobility for All. I've been working in the nonprofit world for almost 20 years with a bit of a entrepreneurship pause that I had there, but I'm excited to really keep supporting the community in this way now. And yeah, I think that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Felipe. Welcome to the team. And I see some people already wooing for you in the chat.
Sweet. Thank you.
Thanks. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, thank you for adding the statement in the chat, Angel. I'm going to put this plug again. as you know, we're doing the 2025 Mobility Heroes nominations. So I would love to have more responses than the ones I currently have. Please nominate your favorite mobility hero before the end of the month. We want to have another round of drivers that we recognize, and we're also looking for transit professionals, school drivers, school bus drivers, for-profit drivers, volunteer drivers. So if you have any of those in your mind that you would like to nominate, please do it. There's a QR code, and I'll put the link also in the chat here in a sec. Thank you.
Hey, on to our next update. We have the in-person coordinating council meeting on February 25th. We've been talking about this for months now, so I hope you all can make it. It's a great opportunity to network and for regional collaboration. There's carpool options from Boulder, Longmont, Broomfield, and Lafayette so far. And someone will add a link in the chat, but please sign up if you want to carpool, and I hope to see most of you there. We also just want to highlight Dr. Mac's meeting. Stephanie, I don't know if you're on the call and you want to speak to this, but yeah, we encourage everyone to attend. Dr. Mac. Great.
Yeah, I can talk to you. Sorry about any background noise if you can hear. But yeah, we're hosting our regional coordinating council. So this is a time for all of the local coordinating councils. So the MAC is one of those to come together to just really talk and connect with the other counties and figure out how we can address some of the transportation barriers. And this meeting specifically, we will also be having a panel discussion, but we'll be talking about just kind of how to be active in your community and some of the benefits of that. So all are welcome to join. I think the link is in the agenda that was sent out, but I can also paste that in the chat as well. But yeah, hope to have y'all there. It is virtual also, so anyone can join.
Thanks, Stephanie. Sounds great.
So I can take this one. I'm not sure. I don't think Gabe or Gisa are on the call. So Gabe and Gisa, they're doing kind of a tour around the region, the RTD service area, to talk about accessibility. So we reached out after they held one in Inglewood, I think about 3 months ago, to see if we could host one in Boulder County. So we're partnering with the Center for People with Disabilities to host it. There are limited seats, so I think that there's only 25 spots, and it's specifically a listening session around accessibility. So it doesn't have to just be like RTD's Access-Ride. It could also be like ADA accessibility to the fixed route bus, but it's just going to be a wonderful conversation. So please sign up if you haven't already. Next slide. Okay, so next I'm going to hand it over to Liviana Lewin, who is our Vision Zero program manager. So we'll go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm not sure if you have slides, Liviana.
Oh, no, you can just leave that up, actually.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just give a quick update. So yeah, thank you so much. Again, I'm Liviana Lewin with Boulder County. I'm about to celebrate my 1-year anniversary with the county as Vision Zero program manager, and wanted to make sure you know about the Vision Zero action plan and an ongoing and upcoming opportunities to participate. I was with you all in the summer, so thanks for having me back. So Vision Zero, as you may know, is all about transportation safety. It's short for zero traffic deaths, and really reflects the county's commitment to eliminating traffic crashes that result in fatalities and serious injuries. So the project will be developing a detailed plan. It's like a prioritized to-do list of actions that the county and various partners are going to take. And you'll see that that's plural up there because we actually have 3 plans. One is for unincorporated Boulder County and the mountain towns of Jamestown, Nederland, and Ward. Lafayette is also working on one, and Superior as well. So we're all working together. All of our plans have a real safety focus. Many of the actions will be engineering focused because that's what we as agencies have the most direct control over. So these are things like signal timing changes, rumble strips, guardrails, bike facilities, and more. We'll also be looking at enforcement and education and like other non-infrastructure approaches to really support a safety culture. We've done a very detailed analysis of crash data and always complement that with community input. So that's what I wanted to highlight today. We're doing in-person events like these. We have an online survey. We're really trying to introduce some of the engineering treatments that we're proposing to address the crash types that we're seeing, and also get your input on prioritization for prioritizing our projects. So we have an online survey in both English and Spanish. Would love it if you could share these with your networks. And I think the link was in the email sent to you, but we can also put it in the chat here. We had a lot of fun at Winter Bike to Work Day in Boulder last week, and we'll be in Netherlands tomorrow for their town talk from 3 to 5 p.m. At Kathmandu. Please do take the survey. Right now, the Boulder County survey is open. Superior's, we're doing this kind of in a rolling way. Superior's has finished theirs, Boulder County is open, and Lafayette is going to be having their survey open soon. So the Boulder County survey is open through March 2nd. Also, feel free to reach out to me if you have any other groups you think would be interested in getting an update or chatting directly. So yeah, I think we're trying to finish up, so I'll stop there. Happy to answer any questions after the meeting or whenever. So thank you for the time and thanks for all y'all are doing.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Liviana? Okay. So I just wanted to let you all know, if you have questions, you can reach out directly to her. I wanted to let you know that next month we're going to have our in-person training. So just thank you, Maya. This is a reminder. We will be providing lunch. I'm going to send out an Eventbrite registration so that I know how much lunch to order. But we have a wonderful consultant called Culture Energized that really focuses on racial equity within organizational cultures and like how to address your organizational culture. And so it will be a little bit longer than normal because we are going to be meeting over lunchtime. So currently I have it tentatively scheduled for 11 to 2 at the Boulder Main Library. So I will send out the link to all of the MAC attendee lists or the MAC email lists to see if any people want to register. And really the intent of this is to try to level the playing field and ensure that as a coalition, our partners have a similar understanding of like impacts on racial equity and organizational culture. I think that's the end of our agenda. We will send out the newsletter as always on Monday. So it'll give a roundup of what we talked about today, but we really appreciate your time. Thank you all for attending today.